Rural Futures grants always want collaborative partnerships. They want relationships to be built, and they're really focused on having to develop innovative solutions to challenge facing rural people and places. At the same time, I knew Roberto Gallardo, who will be sharing a lot more about the methodology and the research soon. But I'd known him for quite a while because he's really one of the leading experts in broadband availability across the state and how rural communities are using it. And we started having a conversation, Jeremy, Roberto, and I.
And we included multiple indicators about digital platforms. We did that survey before, kind of the baseline. We then did some interventions, of which you will hear from the community shortly. And then we are going to wrap up with the second version of the trust survey, and hopefully we're going to see some movement, especially in those questions that had to do with digital platforms. Overall trust in the community, trust in local government, how responsive they are, all those things are captured in the survey.
I'm an extension educator in Nebraska City, town of about 8,000 people. And when I was approached with the opportunity to take part in this project, I was kind of intriguing to see how we could use social media to engage the community and build trust. There were some needs to do that really in the community, so it was a great opportunity.
Student on our project here in Ravenna, and was a huge help. But they came down to kind of assess our community and try to help us with those goals and our reach and getting our numbers up on social media too. Both on, we have a chamber Facebook page and the economic development Facebook page. And that was a huge part of it. You know, all the things that we've learned through Charlotte, Roberto, Jeremy have, they're just invaluable. I mean, we've been able to take our community, I think, to the next step, how we feel about it. But it's been a great experience.
I'm a senior here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, focusing on creative media through my major of journalism and media communications. And of course, I'm a student worker here at the UNS Social Media Lab and contributor to these rural civic engagement projects through it. My involvement with our group here began before I was a part of UNS Social Media Lab.
We did multiple assessments, but this one is the one that's really gonna drive the evaluation kind of impact perspective. We also assessed the community on the intelligent community indicators. And lastly, Jeremy's students went out there and assessed kind of on the social media front. So we conducted 3 different assessments.
That Roberto and Charlotte are really subject matter experts on rural issues.
For over 20 years, we've had different processes that we do some visioning with the communities of identifying next action steps.
Quite a variety of activities that help support rural communities. A lot of entrepreneurship work, for instance. I've done a fair amount of gathering community input and visioning, strategic planning, helping communities to work collaboratively and to think long-term and strategically about the things that they're doing. So it's something that I know the community I'm in has really received what we're doing, and it's changed the way they operate. They really are more collaborative as a community now, as they've seen the value of doing that. So we've had some pretty valuable activities.
What we're doing here with the network of extension colleagues is we're trying to get the word and the knowledge out there that broadband has the potential to transform the quality of life of rural communities. And it's not only about the infrastructure, though it's important, but it's also about the adoption and use of this technology, of which, of course, this is an example, civic engagement, but tourism and economic development, community development, and making your city more responsive are all can be enhanced through the use of broadband applications. So that's kind of what we're pushing. We're hoping that these communities not only move the needle in the civic engagement front, but like Ravenna is doing with more focused on their chamber and Main Street, and economic development. I think that we have the potential to move the needle there as well.
One of the things that Ashland has focused on is the paid, promoted, boosted Facebook posts as Facebook becomes more of a pay-for-play space. But having said that, Ravenna has had these great numbers because they have strong, tight social networks.
You know, our whole thing, we all talked about, I think that it's the human element, and like you said, the relationships, But Gina and I kind of have the personalities that we're not afraid to kind of make fun of ourselves. One of the videos we did was Gina had these blow-up sumo wrestler suits that we put on, and it was to promote a Halloween promotion, basically like a Halloween event that she was putting on, a costume party, basically. And we were going up and down the street in those and saying, you know, come to the event. And I mean, it's just making people laugh. And if you can connect to them on that human level and say, well, they can make fun of themselves and get dressed up like that. That's kind of what we've tried to do in the majority of the videos. I don't know. And then just going into the businesses and saying, you know, okay, this is on sale, or look at these great items they have for Christmas, or things like that. Just, I guess, pointing out that people don't always take the time to get into the businesses to see what they have. That's been a huge thing too. You have anything to add?
I mean, there's just, in certain areas of what we do, there's definitely a lot of desire for information. So the second we put up, for instance, our Anavar poster, you know, that gets extreme amount of hits, and then everybody shares it, you know, and that's why that gets such good numbers. There's definitely certain things that we put out there that people are literally just waiting for the information, you know, and so then it does really, really well, which is exciting because we can use that knowledge now to, you know, since we don't do paid posts, that we're excited to start doing those because we have data that shows it's worth it to get an even better reach now and start budgeting for that.
And I think it's important to mention why Gina and Dana were doing so well was because of that personality, was because they weren't afraid to laugh at themselves, but they were also playing by Facebook's like rules. They were using Facebook video in a local community. They had already a decent following, and they're just entertaining. So when you put all of that together, you're going to get great engagement like you saw there, because they're not posting a YouTube link on their Facebook. They're just turning on Facebook Live. And so Facebook is going to push you in front of the crowd because you're playing by their rule set. And because they're putting such great content out there that's engaging with their audience, it just works. But speaking of the tools, like Jeremy mentioned, we use Meltwater, we use Alexa provided by Amazon, we use Note Excel, we use Union Metrics, Instagram Insights, and all of this.
I mean, the lab has been a startup for a half a dozen years, and part of it is finding new ways to fund what we're trying to do. I think, you know, the other thing we can say is that our campus is focused on, it's a student-focused campus, it's a metropolitan campus, it's focused on community engagement.
What we want to do is to have best practices, and so we're, you know, this is even one meeting that we're starting to share best practices. I do think this has been an excellent example of teaching, research, and extension working together from the different disciplines, and really engaging the community where we weren't. I'm sure you've heard researching on the communities instead of they were really engaged in the process. So I think those are things that we'll want to replicate. The best practices, I think Rex mentioned the emergency management systems. We've already talked with our policy center, and there's interest in developing some different materials and look at grants there. When you look at outcomes on civic engagement, we obviously hope that people become more engaged and in their communities, and that they know what's going on, and that those communities that can build, become more interactive and have more trust and relationship. You know, our smaller communities, there's a lot of relationships that happen anyway, but it's still difficult, which we found, I think, through the grant, when you need to share information maybe from a government, and you have your city government, and you have something to share. How do you get that out when people aren't reading newspapers and they're not following listening to the radio, or there's not a radio in the town? You have to be unique at that. So I think that longer term, that's hopefully we're helping Nebraska that way. One of the things they did was text messaging too. When they were checking on how to inform people, that's one of the things they did find out. The best way right now is texting, better than email. And so you have a text messaging service to get information out to people, and you can draw them. And the Facebook, I think, is what I'm seeing, even their reach. It's a way to inform, but if you really want to get a message out quickly, it seems like the texting is probably working better, at least in Ravenna and a lot of the smaller communities yet. Because there are people, we all know them, that refuse to have a presence on social media. And so you have to figure out how to communicate to all of them, because you don't want to only communicate to one audience. And I think that's part of when we look at things, is how do you share that information when they're to multiple users and end users.
Digital Readiness Survey is a kind of a spin-off in a way from this project, where we're trying to really get at how they're using and the impact it's having beyond the economic impact that we hear all the time. It's more on the quality of life component.
I think Charlotte really nailed it when she said that this has been one of the most rewarding experiences. I think I've learned so much from this, and I think this whole project has had a snowball effect on us. I mean, there were so many projects that we've started that we didn't even have time to mention today. So it's just been a great experience. It's helped both the Chamber and Economic Development. So we are really grateful to be a part of it.
Some new tools, and it's fun to have new ways of working with communities. So appreciate that.
Roberto, going forward, what do you see?
Well, I'm really excited to continue working on some level of contact with these three communities, and then hopefully when we wrap up and we get the best practices and lessons learned, we can replicate this in other rural communities across the country. And I'm going to echo what Charlotte said. It's been a blast working with three communities and colleagues in Nebraska. Thank you so much for being so fun and easy to work with.